Okay, we are ready to move on the second presentation of the afternoon, and it's my pleasure to introduce to all of you Jacob Jezioro. Please, a warm applause for Jacob. Please, a warm applause for Jacob. Thank you. I'm going to read a little bit of his bio. Native of Nashville, Tennessee, Jacob Jezioro grew up in a musical household and was initially mentored by his father, a local bassist and jazz guitarist who taught him to play American songbook tunes by ear. Jezioro's musical foundation is also rooted in classical study, which he continued to develop while at Indiana University with his mentor, Kurt Muroki. After finishing his undergrad degree, he had the opportunity to play in a JSOM ensemble coached by Walter Smith III, which I think is here. Please also welcome Walter Smith, where he wrote some of his first compositions. This led to performances in Austria with the group, as well as with guest artists Carl Rosenwinkel and Becca Stevens. And he's looking forward to traveling with some of his Berklee Global Jazz Institute colleagues to Panama and Costa Rica this summer. Yeah, it's going to be a beautiful trip. His advisor is Chase Morin, and we'd like to welcome, as Jacob committee member, Professor Patricia Zarate Perez. Please, a warm welcome to Patricia as well. Jacob Jezioro.
Hi everyone, this is my presentation. It's called Multi-track Mind, Connections in Social Music, Art, and Anarchy. Thank you very much for being here. If you could please hold any applause until the end, as we have limited time. I will first play the music and then do my best to give a cohesive explanation of the experience I was trying to convey in these 5 pieces. In this piece we use zero gravity, which it means fear training, something we talk about a lot here at the Institute. We use non-judgment to directly engage with the uncomfortable, and has connotations of flight. This one's about living without illusion. It's connected to John Cage and Husserl's idea of bracketing, where paradigms of belief are broken down. Okay, for this next piece, I'd love a little theatrical help from the audience. When you hear the performance stop or on my cue, each of you are invited to intone one of the quotes on this slide and repeat it to create ancestral cacophony. Hegel rejected the idea of art for art's sake. He believed it was the sensuous presentation of ideas. Hegel rejected the idea of art for art's sake. He believed it was the sensuous presentation of ideas. Hegel rejected the idea of art for art's sake. He believed it was the sensuous presentation of ideas. Hegel rejected the idea of art for art's sake. He believed it was the sensuous presentation of ideas. Hegel rejected the idea of art for art's sake. He believed it was the sensuous presentation of ideas. Hegel rejected the idea of art for art's sake. He believed it was the sensuous. As well as being a good symbol for anarchy, piñata also connects with the anti-abstraction attitude from my reading of Max Stirner's philosophy. Please enjoy this zero gravity section from Piñata. final piece is based on a quote from Henry David Thoreau. My goal for this project was to begin a process of clarifying the connections between my philosophical and artistic interests, in particular the relationship between activism and music, in order to better understand my purpose as an artist. The music I composed came out of a kind of struggle with abstract values as I engaged with my feeling of having several callings, which seemed mutually exclusive. Making an effort not to judge myself or my ambivalence, I wanted to refresh my thinking about these callings based on a premise that perhaps they could coexist for me in the future. My culminating experience project consisted of an artification of everyday life and the shifting syncretism of conflicting beliefs. Making use of this inner tension, I began a positive growth process for myself and hopefully for others. Practically speaking, my challenge to myself was to create 5 pieces that didn't sound like each other. Picabia was truly modern in that he was able to create paintings that don't look like each other, never settling for too long in one genre or another, one ideology or another, one religion or another. In line with this idea of syncretism, I was also thinking about duality. So I decided to write music for a classical quintet using an instrumentation I borrowed from Prokofiev, Opus 39. The second group is a chordless free jazz quartet, and for the final piece, I combined both groups in a gesture of artivism. The Western tradition represents idealism, while the Afro-diasporic tradition represents materialism. The quintet is the mind, the quartet is the body. Duchamp is a big inspiration for me in that he never lost his mind over art as a one-dimensional thing. In a way, it can damage the roots of our humanity, similar to how it used to be argued it would disconnect us from the creator. In the sense of artification, he was truly visionary in the way that he lived his life. But paradoxically, Duchamp is one of the fathers of conceptual art. Looking into his work and others, I came to a comparison of different forms of expression, where I now conceptualize history differently based on various works I've been exposed to. What is anarchism? In order to dispel the prejudice that it is basically irrational and reactionary as a political stance, I'd like to give a simple definition. Anarchism is the tendency in human history of ordinary people to want to break down structures of hierarchy and domination in favor of horizontal connections based on free association and mutual aid. Please notice the political cartoon for Mother Earth, a magazine edited by prominent anarchist activist Emma Goldman. The cover for this issue is a piece by Man Ray, Dadaist surrealist painter and friend of Marcel Duchamp. You may be wondering, and it is no coincidence that the final year of the magazine's circulation is also the year Congress passed the Espionage Act. Mother Earth had begun to encourage direct opposition to the military draft in protest of World War I. As a result of their protests and efforts to avert a meaningless war, Goldman and her co-editor Alexander Berkman were found guilty of violating the Espionage Act, and in 1919 were deported to the Soviet Union along with 258 others. On 2019, Julian Assange was indicted on 17 charges under the Espionage Act and is now incarcerated in a maximum security prison in southeast London. Matisse said that there are always flowers for those who want to see them, but Hegel rejected the idea of art for art's sake. He believed it was the sensuous presentation of ideas. Hegel also believed that the dissonance of divergent ideas is necessary for humanitarian growth. He accepted that history is a difficult process of finding balance and value in things which are more easily considered worthless.
Get yourself your degree and get yourself through college and then become at least a less unrespectable, at least a bit more respectable citizen than the one you're talking to now, you know. So, yeah. I think you spend enough time, getting corrupted by my ideas.
Jacob.
Thanks.
Jacob Jezioro, please. Welcome. Jacob, why, we know we had to kind of close the presentation, but why don't you want to maybe say something that you didn't say? Is anything like maybe your future plans or anything that was left out that you would like to briefly state?
Yeah. Well, the intellectual history slide I didn't get to. I also wanted to play this little clip from Marcel.
Okay,
I don't know if you guys want to hear it.
And maybe not.
But yeah. So I think the future plans for me with this project in particular is just like to keep exploring all of the philosophy and the history behind. I mean, because I feel like a big part of this process is me struggling between the idea of like looking into more intellectual and cultural things versus like kind of studying music and trying to get better and better at my craft. So I think just keep finding those connections and try to build on that process. It's going to be a lifelong thing for me, I think.
Wonderful. I'm going to pass the microphone to your committee member, Patrizia Serrata Perez. Patrizia.
Thank you. Jacob, this is a beautiful project.
Thank you.
Thank you for presenting it so beautifully. I want to mention a couple of things. You are talking about conflicting beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to choose. You don't have to be one or the other.
Uh-huh.
Not necessarily. We live in a world that has conflicted views. We live in a world that is contrasting and that has, very different people, diverse type of people. So don't think that you have to find the answer. There may not be any answer.
Yeah.
It may be the answer that both things have to coexist.
Right.
Things that are contrasting may coexist. But what could also help in this process is to expand your dimensions of thoughts by reading scholars, philosophers, academics that come from non-privileged positions. Because we have a lot of wonderful academic materials, and it's very accessible to us. But also things that may be unidimensional. So, when you start reading about Latina feminist theorists, African American scholars, you will expand the cultural context of the things that you're trying to reach, and then you may see that the duality, that may be the world we live in this constant duality. In fact, history was built on contradictions, Freedom against slavery, the democracy flag of the United States against its own history. Arty handiwork of one of your songs against the call to action, what we talk about at the Institute. Civil disobedience versus obedience. All those things, I think, will get more and more clear once you get into more and more non-privileged positions. Okay? But overall, I love the music. It's beautiful. I love the fact that you have many different musical styles. The more you read about African scholars or indigenous people, the more you will also want to hear those sounds in your music. But overall, it's a beautiful presentation, and congratulations. You have come a long way.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Maybe Chase, as your advisor, you want to follow?
Man, just seeing the evolution over the past few months, it's been really remarkable. You made probably 5 different presentations at this point, at least, right? And it's amazing. I've loved being your advisor and working with you and talking about all of these things.
Yeah,
and
I
feel like it's a continuing evolution, so I can't wait to see how this evolves. The next presentation might be a completely new thing. When we were over with Patricia and Danilo a few days ago, and we were talking about some of the specifics in the songs, like the titles, what they specifically meant, and some of the concepts behind them. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that, because that was really heavy, some of the stuff we were talking about related to the pieces, and you kind of skimmed over a little bit in the presentation for time's sake. Maybe you could go into like Pinata, for example, and maybe a few others, just touch upon that.
Sure. So this first piece was kind of inspired a little bit by Eric Satie's piano music, like how he would write like 5-1 5-1 5-1 5, like just like kind of mocking like a little bit, and that to me that contrasts with the kind of the more human aspect of like I'm just a person, like there's all this stuff happening, like what can I do to like actually just go out there and like do direct things, like direct action in the world, like working in a soup kitchen or something. Like why am I not working? Like why am I not doing that kind of thing? I mean, I love music, but to me that was just kind of posing those two questions against each other. And then in the improv section, we tried to like see where they can overlap through zero gravity. That was that one. And then this one is more influenced by John Cage and he had this technique where he'd use like time brackets, and well, a lot of composers did it, but his number pieces in particular, and he actually said that to him they were like little anarchist societies. So I kind of borrowed some techniques from John Cage there. And the dream exercise was like an effort to be more lyrical and more inspired by like the sounds from Prokofiev, in the sort of a more romantic and idealist standpoint, but also in the context of Dada with like, because it's also in the context of the project as a whole. It's supposed to be not based on any ideology, and that's something it really resonates with Dada and the Dada movement. Very against ideology, and they didn't want anything to be like theoretical or theorized. Pinata, I was talking about this with Patty, and I just kind of thought pinata was a good symbol for like chaos, and kind of order out of chaos, I guess, but also just chaos, because I like chaos, and because I mean really the order comes from understanding it. It's not like we trying to make it in order, but just like being aware of it.
Is that Pedro from Napoleon Dynamite?
Yeah, it is.
Okay. I always wonder.
Vote for Pedro. Yeah. And then this one just came straight out of this quote. So I wrote melodies that symbolize the fruit that ripen, and they don't take the same time to ripen. Some of them get there before the others, and some of them fall first, and then later others fall. So I try to symbolize that with the melodies not lining up, and some of them getting to the end before the others, and the bass and the there was an oboe who was playing like multiphonics, and I thought that was a good representation for, like, you know, when you cut a tree open, you see the inside, and it's like this spiral thing with this complex kind of structure. So I was hearing like the multiphonic as kind of that sound. So yeah, and the bass and the drums were like the tree kind of in the wind, and just the structural element. So those are the 5 pieces, yeah.
Awesome, thank you for sharing. And you know, just also, I think Luke's project also made me think a little bit about this, the third stream idea, and and you have such a strong character already in your chamber music, right? I mean, really, it feels like it's coming organically out of the tradition, and it has something to say. So, exploring that more in connection with the improvised and free material, I think there's some fruit to be had. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jay. Thanks for all your help this semester. It's amazing.
Danilo.
Intervene really quick, because I have an idea right now that watching this, I was thinking, like, you really brought this to the table when Chase talked about that in this era, if you're not thinking, if you're not confused, you're not thinking clearly. That's the premises of where we at right now. So you're a prime example of that. I really enjoyed seeing and watching, and the music really comes out powerful. I love that little interjection of Billie Holiday.
Yeah.
That's deep. That sets a mood. I will go a little bit onto what Patricia said. I was talking about the global relevance of through exchange between cultures to keep finding more, so we can include more and be a voice for different continents. You know, which you can definitely expand on that. And the thing I was gonna think about. There's one just little detail before I forget. And now musically and the presentation came together. You really walked us through the chaos, the zero gravity experience with your different presentations. I would just think about this: that about optimism. It should be a part of your strategy. In order for us to build a better future, we have to believe that we can build a better future, and that uncertainty is part of our fuel to move into this space. You know, so Why? Because that makes you a step up, which you just open that door for you to take responsibility in building that better future. And that's all I have to say. Congratulations, it's an amazing, amazing project.
Wow, and piggyback from Danilo, I really agree with just you say about that, and I think you are such an example of what Danilo talks about. You are an example of optimism. Everything that you've done this year, the way you develop, even this presentation from where he started to where he came today, it's an example. It's an example of light, and I think that part should be also in your music. Very, create that dualism too. And I want to congratulate you, Jacob, because this is an incredibly creative presentation. I was trying to think in 4 years of a master. This never happened. Like maybe this is one of the most creative presentation. I know for you was important to, in a way, create also a performance of your presentation. It was really hard. Nobody ever thought of it. I really think you found a formula that worked perfectly for you. So congratulations. Your music is very beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
That was amazing. That was just so, the engagement of the audience was so special. I haven't seen anything like that. As he said, the presentation was really original. I had a couple of questions. Well, one also, it was so nice to hear so much music. Like you really figured out a way to tell the message through the music. And that's not as easy, to do it as well as you did. All the pieces really reflected the themes, like you could really hear the connection. I had a question, well, two questions. Was that Hugh Hefner in the picture?
Say what?
It looked like Hugh Hefner. Who was that in the...
Oh, which one? No.
Okay, good. I was just... I was like, is that Hugh Hefner? Anyway, okay. And the other question, when you said, there was a line you said before this, maybe, I don't know if you need to look at your notes, but can you explain just what you meant by the quintet is the mind and the quartet is the body?
Oh, sure. Well, that was just kind of an extension of how I I learned kind of in my undergrad from like music history classes that some people sort of conceive of, history is obviously a construction. It's not like we have the truth. It's like we're constructing the truth with the information that we have. So the idea that the Western music canon kind of represents idealism in a way, and philosophically kind of extends from like Plato and that kind of way of thinking, versus like the Afro-diasporic tradition, which is more based on the connection to the body, I think. And for me represents like, well, also in classical music, it's all based on the composition. Like this is the idea that the composer intended, and we're all trying to express this idea and serve the idea that the composer intended. Versus in jazz, I think it's more based on the performance. So that's another way that it reflects kind of materialism and not materialism in the way like you want more stuff. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like connection to not abstract ideas, but just the body. Yeah.
I think we're out of time, but I would love to talk to you more about that in the future, because I think I would like to dig deeper into that with you.
Sure.
No, this is a long conversation.
Yeah, it's not like
exactly. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, Patty basically covered that too. But yeah, I just wanted to, and there was something you said right before that. Do you have like the sentence or two before that that I just didn't hear?
The Western tradition represents idealism, while the Afro-diasporic tradition represents materialism. But not materialism in a negative sense. Okay. Yeah.
We can start a debate on that.
Okay.
Okay, well, that's good. All right, great presentation. Thank you.
Yes, Jacob.
Woo.